Moonlight's eternal promise. The lunar veil shimmered above me like a gossamer curtain of starlight, but something darker lurked behind its ethereal beauty. Blood had been spilled on nights like this before. Witch blood, vampire blood, all of it seeping into the earth beneath my feet. I could feel it calling to my magic, ancient violence resonating with the power that coursed through my veins. I hadn't meant to venture this far from the Coven's sanctuary. The Boundary Woods held dangers far worse than vampires, things that slithered through shadow and whispered promises that could drive even the strongest witch mad. But something pulled me forward, each step carrying me deeper into the midnight realm where magic grew wild and untamed. My fingers tingled with excess energy, small sparks of violet light dancing between them. The magic within me responded to the rare alignment above, growing stronger with each passing moment. As a daughter of the Enchanted Coven, I'd been taught to fear this raw power, to contain it within the strict boundaries of our ancient laws. We all knew the stories of witches who'd let their power run unchecked, how they'd transformed into creatures of pure magic, their humanity burning away like morning mist. I reached a clearing where moonlight pooled like liquid silver on the grass. The rational part of my mind urged me to turn back, to return to the safety of the Coven's walls. Instead, I lifted my face to the stars and let my power flow freely for the first time in my life. Purple light erupted from my palms, weaving through the air in intricate patterns that matched the rhythm of my heartbeat. The magic sang through my blood, sweet and seductive, promising things I'd never dared to dream. "Beautiful," a voice murmured from the shadows, rich as dark honey, and just as dangerous. I spun around, magic crackling defensively around my fingers. He emerged from the darkness like a figure from a dream, tall and elegant, with features that seemed carved from marble. But it was his eyes that caught me, ancient and sorrowful despite the gentle smile playing at his lips. They held centuries of pain, of watching civilizations rise and fall, of loving and losing until the weight of memory became almost unbearable. I knew instantly what he was. Vampire. The air grew thick with the scent of copper and roses, his power manifesting in response to mine. I'd been taught that vampire magic was corrupt, a twisted mockery of true power. But this was something else entirely. Dark and intoxicating, yes, but with an underlying complexity that called to something deep within my soul. "You should run," he said softly, though he made no move to attack. His fangs gleamed in the moonlight, not threateningly, but as a reminder of what he was, what he needed to survive. That would be the wise choice. I should have. Every lesson, every warning, every story I'd ever heard screamed at me to flee. The last witch who'd fallen for a vampire's charms had been found drained and cold, her magic twisted into something that still haunted the border woods. But beneath his predator's grace, I sensed a pain that echoed my own loneliness. "I'm not afraid." "No," he mused, taking a careful step closer. The shadows seemed to curl around him like loyal pets. "You're not, are you? I'm Marcus." Lola. The name slipped out before I could stop it. My magic, rather than recoiling from his darkness as I'd been taught it would, reached for him like tendrils of light seeking warmth. The air between us crackled with possibility and danger. He noticed, his eyes widening slightly as purple sparkles danced in the air between us. They mixed with his shadows, creating complex patterns. "Your power, it's extraordinary. I've never seen anything like it. Most witchlight burns us, but yours? It's stronger tonight, under the lunar veil." I didn't know why I was telling him this, sharing secrets with a creature I'd been raised to despise. Yet something about his presence felt right, as if the universe itself had orchestrated this moment. The old books say the veil thins the boundaries between all realms, life and death, light and shadow. Yes, Marcus said, now close enough that I could see flecks of blood red in his dark eyes. It strips away illusion, showing us things as they truly are. His hand lifted, hesitating just shy of touching the magic that swirled around me. May I? I nodded, my breath catching as his fingers brushed through the violet light. Instead of dissipating as I expected, my magic intensified, wrapping around his hand like a caress. Where it touched him, his shadows transformed, becoming something neither light nor dark, but beautifully, terrifyingly other. A gasp escaped him, wonder replacing the sorrow in his expression. Impossible, he whispered. I haven't felt anything so purely alive in centuries. His voice caught on the word alive, centuries of loss echoing in that single syllable. My heart raced as he stepped closer still, our energies intertwining in the space between us. Everything I'd been taught about vampires, their coldness, their cruelty, their emptiness, crumbled in the face of the gentle awe I saw in Marcus's eyes. Yet I couldn't forget what he was. Even now, I could sense the predator beneath his civilized veneer, the hunger that was as much a part of him as magic was of me. That first night changed everything. We talked until dawn threatened the horizon, sharing pieces of ourselves that we'd never dared show anyone else. He told me of his turning centuries ago, of watching everyone he loved grow old and die while he remained unchanged, of the madness that took some vampires after their first century, when the weight of accumulated time became too much to bear. I spoke of the suffocating weight of coven expectations, of being the most powerful witch of my generation, but never being allowed to fully embrace that power, of the whispers that followed me, wondering if I'd follow in my grandmother's footsteps. They'd executed her for dark magic when I was young. Her screams still haunted my dreams. I should go, I said finally, though every fiber of my being protested the idea of leaving. The coven will notice my absence, and they will be looking for me. The stronger a witch's power, the more closely she was watched. Marcus caught my hand as I turned to leave, his touch sending shivers of electricity through my entire body. His skin was cool, but everywhere our flesh met, heat bloomed. Will you come back tomorrow night? I knew I shouldn't. The penalty for consorting with vampires was severe, exile at best, a fate worse than death at worst. The coven had ways of binding a witch's power that left her trapped inside her own mind, aware but unable to access the magic that was as essential as breathing. But looking into his eyes, I couldn't imagine staying away. Yes. That promise marked the beginning of our secret romance. Night after night, I slipped away from the coven to meet him in our clearing. Sometimes we talked for hours, sharing stories and dreams. Other times we sat in comfortable silence, my magic dancing around us both as he held me close. Always, there was the underlying current of danger, the knowledge that discovery would mean destruction for us both. Marcus showed me a different side of vampire nature than the stories I'd been told. He was thoughtful, kind, and carried a deep appreciation for beauty that centuries of life hadn't diminished. When he looked at me, I felt truly seen for the first time in my life. Yet he never hid his darker nature. I learned to recognize the signs of his hunger, the way his eyes tracked the pulse in my throat, how his fangs would emerge when passion ran high. Our first kiss happened beneath a crescent moon. His lips were cool against mine, but they warmed quickly as magic sparked between us. I tasted copper as his fangs grazed my lower lip, not breaking the skin, but promising darker pleasures. The moment we touched, power surged through me like never before, turning every nerve ending to starlight. Marcus pulled back with a gasp, his eyes wide with wonder and tinged with crimson. "Your magic," he breathed. "It's inside me. I can feel it." A drop of my blood stained his lips. and where it touched him, his skin seemed to glow from within. I could feel him too. The depth of his emotions, the weight of his years, the growing light in his soul that matched the glow in mine. But I also felt his darkness, the predator's instincts that were as much a part of him as his heart. It should have frightened me. Instead, it thrilled me. From that moment on, our bond grew stronger with each passing night. My magic responded to his presence instinctively, reaching for him even before I saw him. And though he had no magic of his own, I swore I could feel echoes of power stirring in him when we were together. Sometimes, in moments of passion, my magic would sink into him completely, making his eyes glow with violet fire. But paradise, as always, proved fleeting. The first sign of trouble came in the form of whispers among the coven elders. Stories of strange magical disturbances in the boundary woods, of power signatures that didn't match any known spells. Worse were the reports of dead animals found drained of blood, their bodies surrounded by circles of wildflowers that bloomed out of season, vampire feeding mixed with witch magic, in a way that terrified both sides. I knew they were sensing the unique blend of my magic with Marcus's vampire energy. But I couldn't stop meeting him. The thought of never seeing him again hurt more than any punishment the coven could devise. My power grew stronger with each encounter, responding to his darkness in ways that both thrilled and frightened me. The vampire clan noticed too. Marcus told me of growing suspicion among his kind, of questions about where he disappeared to each night. Some claimed they could smell witch magic on him, while others whispered that he was changing, becoming something neither fully vampire nor fully human. We knew discovery was inevitable, but we clung to our stolen moments with desperate intensity. Each kiss carried the taste of danger, each touch held the possibility of revelation. My magic began to show traces of shadow, while Marcus's vampire nature took on aspects of light. We were changing each other in fundamental ways, becoming something entirely new. The breaking point came during the harvest moon. Blood magic ran strongest on such nights, and both vampires and witches grew more dangerous with its influence. We'd been careless, too lost in each other to notice the search parties until they were upon us. Witches and vampires converged on our clearing from all sides, their shock at finding us together quickly turning to rage. Abomination. The coven leader's voice cracked like thunder as she saw Marcus's arms around me, my magic wrapped protectively around us both. Her own power manifested as sickly green light that reeked of decay, proof that her public face of purity hid darker practices. You dare corrupt one of our own. The vampire elder's response was equally venomous, his ancient form shifting between man and monster as his control slipped. Marcus, you dishonor your entire bloodline by consorting with this witch. Have you forgotten what their kind did to your sister? I felt Marcus tense beside me, an old pain flaring through our bond. Later, he would tell me the full story, how his sister had fallen in love with a witch centuries ago, how the coven had turned her into a living weapon against her own kind. But in that moment, his voice remained steady. The only dishonor is in clinging to ancient hatred when love offers a better way. Love? The coven leader spat the word like poison, and the grass withered where her spittle landed. There can be no love between light and shadow. Lola, step away from that creature now, and perhaps we can cleanse you of this taint. But I stood my ground, power building around me like a storm. Where my magic met Marcus's darkness, it created something new. Neither light nor shadow, but a force that made reality itself shudder. He's not the monster here. You are. All of you. Letting blind prejudice rule your hearts. The battle that followed was chaos. Spells and vampire powers clashed as both sides attempted to tear us apart. Marcus and I fought back to back, his strength complementing my magic in perfect harmony. Blood and power mingled in the air as ancient enemies unleashed centuries of hatred. but we were badly outnumbered, and eventually, they separated us. As they dragged us away from one another, I heard Marcus's voice in my mind, stronger than ever before. The astral grove. It's real, Lola. Meet me at the ancient oak when the moon is highest tomorrow night. We'll find it together. They locked me in the coven's strongest containment chamber, thinking their wards would hold me. The walls were carved with runes of binding and painted with the blood of sacrificed magical creatures. They didn't understand that my power had grown beyond their comprehension since meeting Marcus. Love had transformed my magic into something entirely new. I waited until the moon reached its peak, before shattering their wards like glass. The backlash killed the guards instantly, their bodies turning to ash as the corrupted magic they'd wielded consumed them from within. I felt a moment of regret, but not guilt. They'd chosen their path, as I had chosen mine. The ancient oak wasn't far. It stood exactly halfway between Coven and vampire territories, marking the boundary line neither side was supposed to cross. Its branches had been watered with blood from both sides over the centuries, creating a nexus of dark power that made my skin crawl. Marcus was already there when I arrived, looking battle-worn but determined. Fresh blood stained his lips. He'd had to fight his way out, too. I knew you'd come. He pulled me close, kissing me with fierce desperation before pulling back to cup my face in his hands. The astral grove lies 3 days' journey to the north, hidden in a valley where the veils between worlds are thinnest. But the path will be dangerous. Both sides will hunt us. I don't care, I said, meaning it with every fiber of my being. My magic reached for him instinctively, purple light twining with his shadows until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. I choose you, Marcus. I choose us. We ran that night, and every night that followed. During the day, Marcus took shelter in whatever safe spaces we could find, while I wove protection spells around us. At night, we traveled swiftly through shadow and starlight, always moving closer to our destination. They pursued us relentlessly. Witch hunters on spelled brooms filled the skies while vampire trackers stalked the ground. More than once we nearly fell into their traps. But each time, our bond grew stronger. My magic and his vampiric abilities began to blend in ways that should have been impossible, creating something entirely new. We encountered other horrors in the dark places between settlements, things that hunted both witch and vampire alike. Shapeshifters drunk on moonlight, ancient spirits hungry for the taste of magic, demons drawn to the unique power our union created. Each battle left us stronger, but also more changed, our very natures shifting into something that had never existed before. On the third night, as we crested a moonlit hill, we saw it. A valley filled with trees that glowed with their own inner light, their leaves shimmering with colors that didn't exist in our world. The astral grove. But something was wrong. The light pulsed like a heartbeat, and shadows writhed between the trees in ways that defied natural law. Our pursuers had caught up. Both coven and clan surrounded us, cutting off all escape routes except forward. We ran for the grove's entrance, magic and shadow swirling around us as spells and attacks rained down from all sides. Just before we reached the threshold, the coven leader appeared in front of us, her power manifesting as burning white light that barely concealed the corruption at its core. You'll destroy everything we've built, everything we've protected for generations. No, I said, raising my hand as Marcus stood beside me, our powers perfectly united. We'll build something better. Power exploded from us both, my magic and his darkness weaving together into something beautiful and terrible. The combined force knocked our pursuers back, creating an opening just wide enough to slip through. But it also changed them, our unified power rewriting the very essence of those it touched. Witches gasped as shadows curled through their light, while vampires hissed as sparks of magic ignited in their blood. We crossed into the astral grove hand in hand. The moment we passed the boundary, everything changed. Power thrummed through the air around us, ancient and alive and hungry. The trees sang with voices like silver bells, but their song spoke of blood and transformation as much as beauty. A figure materialized before us, neither witch nor vampire, but something older than both. Her form shifted like smoke, but her eyes remained fixed on our joined hands. Where she walked, reality rippled like water, showing glimpses of other worlds, other possibilities. "You seek sanctuary," she said, her voice echoing with the weight of ages. "We seek acceptance," Marcus corrected gently, though his grip on my hand tightened. "A place where love matters more than ancient divisions." The figure smiled, and the entire grove seemed to brighten. Yet in that light, I saw the truth. This was no simple paradise, but a place of power and transformation. "Show me your hearts." Light filled us both, not the burning white of coven magic or the darkness of vampire power, but something in between, something new. In that moment, I felt everything Marcus felt, saw every memory that had shaped him, the pain of his turning, the loneliness of centuries, the joy of finding me. And he saw me too, all of me, every dream and fear and hope I'd ever held. "Your love has already changed the world," the figure said softly. "Look." We turned to see our pursuers frozen at the grove's entrance, watching in wonder as our combined power transformed the very air around them. Where light and shadow met, they created colors never seen before in our world. The hatred in their eyes slowly gave way to understanding as they witnessed what was possible when ancient enemies chose love instead of fear. The figure raised her hands, and the grove's power swept outward like a tide, touching everyone present. "The walls between your peoples have stood for too long. Perhaps it's time for new traditions to take root." Changes rippled through both crowds. Witch's magic began to shimmer with hints of shadow, while darkness around the vampires sparked with points of light. The transformation was beautiful to behold, not a corruption of either side, but an evolution into something greater than both. "The grove accepts you," the figure declared, "and through you, it accepts all who choose love over hatred. You may make your home here, and any others who wish to follow your path will be welcomed as well." As the ancient figure's words echoed through the grove, I watched in awe as magic rippled outward like waves on a moonlit lake. Each pulse of power brought more changes, transforming the hatred that had divided our peoples for centuries into something beautiful and new. Marcus drew me close, his touch sending sparks of violet light dancing across my skin. "Look," he whispered, gesturing to where the coven leader stood frozen in wonder. Her sickly green magic had transformed into swirls of emerald and silver, darkness and light weaving together in perfect harmony. The vampire elder approached us slowly, his ancient eyes wide with revelation. The predatory edge that had always marked his kind had softened, tempered by traces of witchlight that glimmered beneath his skin. "In all my centuries," he murmured, "I never imagined such beauty could exist." Our magics continued to blend and evolve, creating patterns of light and shadow that danced through the air like the aurora borealis. Where they touched the grove's crystalline trees, new blooms burst forth, flowers that glowed with their own inner light and spread a sense of peace through all who beheld them. "The path you've chosen will not be easy," the grove's guardian cautioned, her form shifting like smoke in the wind. "To bridge two worlds requires great strength of heart. Are you prepared for what lies ahead?" I looked at Marcus, seeing in his eyes the same certainty I felt in my soul. Our bond hummed between us, stronger than ever. "We are," we answered as one. She nodded, and the grove itself seemed to bow in response. "Then let this place be your sanctuary and your home. Here, you may build the future you dream of, where others like you can find acceptance and peace." As if responding to her words, the grove began to change. The glowing trees parted, revealing a path that led deeper into the heart of this magical realm. Along its edges, small cottages grew from the living wood, each one a perfect blend of witchcraft and vampire aesthetics. Gardens flourished with night-blooming flowers that sparkled with magical energy. "It's perfect," I breathed, watching as more changes rippled outward. A great hall emerged in the center of the grove, its walls transparent like crystal, but strong as diamond. Within its depths, I could see spaces for teaching, for healing, for bringing together those who sought to transcend the old divisions. Marcus pulled me closer, pressing a gentle kiss to my temple. His touch sent waves of pleasure through our bond, and I felt his joy mingling with mine. "Our home," he murmured against my skin. "The beginning of something new." Others stepped forward, young witches whose power had never quite fit the coven's rigid structures, vampires who had grown weary of endless darkness. In their eyes, I saw the same longing for acceptance that had first drawn Marcus and me together. The Guardian watched with approval as small groups began to explore the grove, their magics already starting to shift and change. "Remember," she said softly, "love is the greatest magic of all. Let it guide you as you build this new community." With those words, she faded into the mist, leaving us to begin our new life. The next few months passed in a blur of activity as we worked to establish our haven. Marcus and I took up residence in a cottage near the grove's heart, where morning sun filtered through enchanted windows that protected him from its harmful rays. Each night, we walked through the grove together, our combined power helping to strengthen the magical barriers that kept our sanctuary safe. More seekers arrived with each passing moon, those who dreamed of a world where love knew no boundaries. We welcomed them all, teaching them to embrace the beautiful fusion of light and shadow that our love had birthed. Our cottage became a place of warmth and tender moments. I learned to delight in the way Marcus would pull me into his arms as sunrise approached, his cool skin warming wherever our flesh met. He discovered a passion for tending the magical gardens, his former darkness now nurturing new life. On clear nights, we would lie in a meadow of luminous flowers, watching as our magics danced together in the star-filled sky. His fingers would trace patterns on my skin, each touch igniting sparks of pleasure that made the very air shimmer around us. In those moments, the weight of centuries seemed to lift from his shoulders, replaced by a peace I'd never seen before. The transformation of our peoples continued, spreading beyond the grove's boundaries. Those who had once hunted us now sought our guidance, drawn by the promise of evolution rather than corruption. The old hatred began to fade, replaced by curiosity and hope. One evening, as we sat entwined on our cottage's porch, watching the sunset paint the grove in shades of gold and purple, Marcus touched my face with infinite tenderness. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked softly. "Leaving everything behind?" I turned to kiss his palm, feeling our magic surge at the contact. "Never," I assured him. "You are my home now. This place, this life we're building together, it's everything I never knew I needed." His smile lit up the growing darkness, and when he kissed me, I tasted the future on his lips. Endless possibilities stretching out before us like the star-filled sky above. Our magic swirled around us, light and shadow dancing together in perfect harmony. In the years that followed, our haven grew into a beacon of hope for both witches and vampires. The grove blossomed under our care, its magic evolving to support the unique blend of powers that now called it home. Children born to our community manifested abilities never seen before: healing shadows, protective darkness, light that nurtured rather than burned. Marcus and I remained at its heart, our love growing stronger with each passing season. The weight of immortality that had once tormented him became a gift rather than a curse, offering us countless years to explore the depths of our connection and watch our dream take root. Every night, as I fall asleep in his arms, I think about that first meeting in the Boundary Woods, how the lunar veil had lifted ancient shrouds, allowing us to see past centuries of prejudice to the truth in one another's hearts. Our love had changed more than just ourselves. It had opened a door to a future where light and shadow could dance together in endless, beautiful possibility. The grove pulses with magic around us, a living testament to the power of choosing love over fear. And as I drift into dreams, wrapped in Marcus's embrace and surrounded by the home we've built together, I know that every step of our journey, every hardship we faced, led us exactly where we were meant to be. In the end, it wasn't about light conquering darkness or shadow subduing light. It was about finding the beauty that exists in between, in the sacred space where opposites meet and transform into something greater than either could be alone. Our love had written a new story, one that would echo through generations to come, proving that the most powerful magic of all lies in having the courage to choose love again and again with every beat of our eternal hearts. Come back to me. The scent of roses filled our bedroom the night I first felt Brendan's presence. Fresh roses, though none bloomed in our garden that bitter November. Their fragrance mingled with his familiar sandalwood cologne, the expensive one I'd given him for our last anniversary, the bottle still half full on his dresser. My heart lurched against my ribs as warmth enveloped me, as tangible as his embraces had always been. Brendan. The name escaped my lips like a prayer, barely disturbing the stillness of the room. The roses grew stronger, and with them came a whisper of wind through the perfectly still air, carrying the ghost of his laughter. 3 weeks had passed since the accident that shattered my world. 21 days of waking up reaching for him, of coffee growing cold because I couldn't bear to drink it alone, of silence where his voice should have been. The police report was crisp and clinical. Head-on collision, drunk driver, instant death. As if the love of my life could be reduced to a few stark sentences on white paper. I'd been folding his clothes. Finally, after weeks of leaving them exactly where he'd dropped them that last morning. His blue cardigan lay across my lap, the one with the wooden buttons I'd sewn back on countless times. He'd worn it the day we met, spilling coffee on himself as he hurried into the art gallery where I worked. I'd helped him clean up, and he'd asked me to dinner right there, coffee still dripping from his sleeve. The warmth intensified, wrapping around me like an embrace. Impossible tears pricked my eyes. I thought I'd cried them all away at the funeral. I miss you, I whispered into the empty room. I miss you so much it hurts to breathe. The melody drifted up from downstairs, so faint I almost missed it. Our song, Can't Help Falling in Love, playing from the grand piano Brendan had insisted on buying for our first anniversary. Every home needs music, he'd said, those green eyes of his dancing with joy as the movers positioned it in our living room. He'd played it almost every evening, filling our home with everything from classical pieces to pop songs, his long fingers dancing across the keys while I painted in my studio nearby. My feet carried me down the stairs before I could think better of it. The piano sat untouched, gathering dust, yet the music grew stronger with each step. As I reached the bottom, a single key pressed itself, striking a clear, resonant note that hung in the air between worlds. "This isn't happening," I murmured, pressing my palms against my temples. But even as denial formed on my lips, I felt it, the distinctive brush of fingers through my hair, exactly as Brendan used to do when he passed behind me. Quiana. My name, breathed in his voice, soft as a summer breeze and rich with love. I spun around, searching for something, anything. The room remained empty, but the air felt thick with possibility. That was the beginning. The signs multiplied as days passed. Coffee brewed itself every morning at exactly 7. just as Brendan had always said it. The scent of paint and turpentine wafted from my abandoned studio, where my easel stood waiting with a blank canvas. Lights flickered in patterns too precise to be accidental, spelling out "love you" in Morse code, a game we'd played during long-distance phone calls early in our relationship. My sister Geraldine's concern grew with each story I shared. "You need help, Q," she insisted over lunch, worry etching lines around her eyes. "This isn't healthy. Brendan wouldn't want you living in denial." But how could I explain that these moments weren't denial? They were the only thing keeping me whole. That feeling Brendan's presence, however impossible, made breathing possible again. Maeve found me on a rain-soaked evening, when the veil between worlds felt particularly thin. She appeared on my doorstep like something from a fairy tale, her silver hair caught up in an artfully messy bun, wearing a dress that seemed to shift colors in the porch light. "Your husband is quite the romantic," she said by way of greeting, her Irish lilt warm with amusement. "He's been leading me here for days, leaving trails of light like breadcrumbs. May I come in?" I should have closed the door. Instead, I stepped aside. Maeve moved through our home with purpose, pausing at spots where memories hung heaviest. The kitchen where Brendan and I had slow danced at midnight. The window seat where we'd planned our future. The wall where our wedding photos caught the last light of day. "Your love story has created quite a stir on the other side," she explained, settling into Brendan's favorite armchair. "It's rare to find a connection strong enough to pierce the veil. Rarer still to find one that holds after death. You can see him." Hope bloomed painfully in my chest. Her smile held centuries of understanding. "He never left, love. He's here now, standing behind you, his hand on your shoulder. He says to remind you about the fireflies." My breath caught. Our first kiss had been on a summer night, surrounded by their dancing light. We'd joked that they were nature's fairy lights, celebrating with us. Later, he'd proposed in the same spot, fireflies creating a natural constellation around us. "He's caught between worlds," Maeve continued, her expression growing serious. "Your grief, your love, they're anchoring him here. But it's dangerous for a soul to linger too long in this space. The pain," she hesitated, "it could consume him entirely." "What can I do?" I asked, desperate to protect him even now. "Learn to live again," she said simply. "He's trying to show you how." That night, I dreamed of Brendan with startling clarity. We stood in my art studio, morning light streaming through the windows. He looked exactly as I remembered, dark curls falling over his forehead, green eyes bright with the mischief I'd fallen in love with. "You stopped painting," he said, running his fingers over my dusty brushes. "I stopped breathing when you died." His smile held a universe of tenderness. "That's not what I asked you to do." "You didn't ask for anything. You left." The words tasted of grief and anger. "Did I?" He moved closer, and I could feel the familiar electricity of his presence. "Look around, love. Really look." The studio had transformed. My old paintings hung on the walls, but they were different, infused with an otherworldly light that seemed to pulse with life. New canvases leaned against the walls, blank but promising. Everything was clean, organized, ready. "You did this?" I had help. His laugh filled the room like sunshine. "It's amazing what a spirit can accomplish with enough motivation. But you have to do the rest." He reached for me, his touch cool but solid. "I have loved you all of my life, Kiana. Death did not change that." I woke with tears on my cheeks and paint beneath my fingernails. The days that followed took on a dreamlike quality. I began painting again, my work flowing from my brushes with an intensity I'd never known before. Colors seemed more vivid, emotions more acute. Each canvas captured moments between worlds, the space where love transcended death. Brendan's presence grew stronger. Sometimes I caught glimpses of him in mirrors or windows. A flash of his smile, the outline of his shape. The house came alive with signs of his love. Fresh flowers appearing in unexpected places. My favorite songs playing softly in empty rooms. The feeling of his arms around me when I cried. But Maeve's warnings echoed. Each manifestation seemed to cost him more energy. The temperature would plummet, lights would strain and dim, and sometimes I heard him gasp with effort. One night, I found him in our bedroom, his form more solid than I'd ever seen it. He stood by the window, bathed in moonlight, looking almost alive. Our song began to play, soft and clear. "Dance with me?" He held out his hand, and this time, when I took it, his touch felt almost warm. I stepped into his arms without hesitation. He felt real, solid, though his skin held the coolness of autumn air. We swayed together, and for a moment, time ceased to exist. "I have to go," he whispered into my hair. "I know." The words felt like broken glass. "Maeve said you're in pain." "Only when you are." His fingers traced my cheek. "You're starting to live again. I see it in your paintings, in your smile. That's all I ever wanted." "How can I let you go?" I pressed closer, trying to memorize the feeling of him. "You don't have to. I'll always be part of you, Kiana. But you have to let me love you differently now." We danced until dawn, painted the sky in whispered pinks and golds. With the first ray of sunlight, Brendan began to fade. "Promise me something," he said, his voice growing distant. "Promise you'll keep painting our love story." "I promise." I reached for him, but my hands passed through air. "I love you." "Forever," he whispered, and then he was gone. 5 years have passed since that morning. My paintings hang in galleries now, each one a window into the space between love and loss, life and death. People often ask what inspires the ethereal light that seems to glow from within each canvas. I tell them it's about love that transcends boundaries. Tonight, as I work on a new piece in my studio, a familiar warmth fills the room. A single firefly drifts through the air, its light pulsing with impossible brightness. It lands on my easel, illuminating the canvas where I'm painting our last dance. I don't need to see Brendan to know he's here, watching over me, loving me in his new way. Some loves, I've learned, are strong enough to transform rather than end. They become the light that guides us home, the warmth that keeps us going, the magic that turns grief into grace. The firefly rises, dancing through the air like a star come down to earth. Its light reminds me of the truth Brendan taught me. Love doesn't die. It simply learns to speak in whispers, in memories, in the quiet moments between heartbeats. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, it learns to shine like fireflies in the dark, guiding us home to the love that never truly leaves us. Garden of Moonlit Whispers. Moonbeams danced across my gossamer wings as I floated through the masquerade, my fairy costume catching starlight with each step. Candlelight flickered against crystal chandeliers, casting shadows that waltzed along marble walls. I hadn't wanted to come to this Halloween party, but something, destiny perhaps, had pulled me here tonight. My best friend Sophie had insisted, spending hours helping me create my costume. Hand-painted wings that shimmered with actual crushed crystals, a gown that seemed woven from morning mist, and a crown of fresh herbs from my tiny apartment garden. The Victorian mansion hosting the party breathed old-world elegance. Vines crept up stone walls outside, and I'd noticed a neglected garden glimpsed through floor-to-ceiling windows. My fingers had itched to bring it back to life, to coax green things from the sleeping earth. That's what I did. Brought beauty back to forgotten spaces. My day job as a landscape designer paid the bills, but my true passion lay in healing herbs and the ancient magic of growing things. Weaving between guests in their elaborate costumes, I caught his gaze from across the grand ballroom. Amber eyes gleamed beneath an artfully crafted werewolf mask, dark fur framing a face that seemed to hold ancient secrets. His presence commanded attention without demanding it, a quiet power that drew me like a moth to flame. The wolf costume wasn't the typical Halloween store variety. It looked handmade, with actual leatherwork and what appeared to be real fur. Leaves and small twigs had been woven into the design, creating the impression of a creature that had just emerged from some enchanted forest. Our eyes locked through our masks, and the bustling party faded to whispers around us. He moved toward me with fluid grace that belied his fierce costume, weaving through the crowd as if drawn by an invisible thread. A subtle scent of cedar and sage surrounded him, so different from the cologne other men wore. "I'm Raphael," he said, his voice rich as honey over warm bread. His slight accent hinted at Mediterranean roots. "And you're the most enchanting fairy I've ever seen. The rosemary in your crown. It's the Spanish variety, isn't it? Rare in these parts." Heat bloomed in my cheeks beneath the shimmer of fairy dust makeup Sophie had insisted on. "Gina," I managed, grateful the glitter hid my blush. "Though tonight I'm going by Thistle. And yes, good eye. The rosemary came from my own plants. Most people wouldn't notice the difference." "Thistle," he repeated, tasting the name. "Perfect for a garden fairy. Beautiful but with hidden strength. Protection and pride in the language of flowers." My pulse quickened. "You know the language of flowers?" "Among other old magics," he said, his eyes twinkling behind the mask. "Your herbs. The rosemary for remembrance, lavender for peace and devotion woven through your hair. The tiny sachets of protective herbs tucked into your costume seams. You practice the old ways." I caught my breath, surprised and delighted. "How did you know all that?" "The same way I sense the garden magic running through your veins. It calls to my own." He gestured to his costume. "The wolf represents more than meets the eye. In the old stories, we were the guardians of wild places, of ancient groves and hidden gardens." The music swelled around us, something classical and sweeping. Raphael extended his hand, somehow elegant despite the claws of his costume. "Dance with me? We can trade garden secrets while we move." Floating. That's how it felt as we moved together, my wings catching moonlight while his fur gleamed silver. Other couples blurred around us as we spoke of plants and poetry, of the magic that lives in small moments. His knowledge of herbs matched my passion for growing things. He knew the old names, the folk uses, the secret ways of planting by moon phases. "I restore gardens," he said as we waltzed. "Take old estates and bring their green spaces back to life. But my land, it needs something more. Someone with vision, with magic in their soul." "How much land?" I asked, attempting to sound casual while every cell within me vibrated with excitement. "An acre behind my grandfather's old stone cottage. Good earth. Just sleeping. Waiting." His eyes held mine. "It needs both sunlight and shadow to thrive properly." Dreams blossomed in my mind, raised beds overflowing with healing herbs, moonflowers climbing trellises, paths winding through beds of lavender. "Like a fairy and a wolf?" I suggested, surprising myself with my boldness. Raphael's smile beneath his mask held promises. "Exactly like that." We danced through the night, sharing stories between songs. He told me of his Italian grandmother who taught him herbcraft, of the gardens he'd restored across Europe before settling here. I shared tales of my own grandmother's teaching, the tiny fire escape garden that had sparked my passion, and the healing teas and tinctures I crafted in my kitchen. Dawn approached too quickly, painting the sky in watercolor hues. As the other guests began to leave, We lingered in the mansion's own neglected garden, trading secrets between overgrown rose bushes and whispered hopes beneath weeping willows. When he kissed me, the stars seemed to shimmer brighter overhead. His mask pushed up, mine tilted aside. The moment was pure magic. "Come see my land tomorrow," he whispered against my hair. "Bring your fairy magic. We could create something extraordinary together." The next day dawned crisp and clear. I dressed carefully. Sturdy boots, comfortable clothes, but I wove herbs into my braided hair for luck and protection. Raphael met me wearing well-worn work clothes, looking somehow equally handsome as he had in his wolf costume. His land took my breath away. The cottage was built from honey-colored stone, with climbing roses that had gone wild around the windows. The acre behind it sloped gently toward a small stream, perfect for a water garden. Old fruit trees dotted the landscape, their branches reaching for the sky like gnarled fingers. Weeks passed quickly after that first weekend. We spent our days planning and planting, transforming his wild acre into something from a fairy tale. Raphael built raised beds while I researched companion planting. We argued playfully over where to place the herb spiral, then celebrated each tiny seedling that pushed through the rich soil. Our garden became our sanctuary. Moonflowers and night-blooming jasmine for him, morning glories, and sun-loving herbs for me. We planted motherwort for love, roses for romance, and lavender for peace. Between the rows, our love grew like wild roses, unstoppable and beautiful, thorns and all. Each section of the garden held its own magic. The healing garden was filled with medicinal herbs: echinacea, yarrow, calendula, and chamomile. The kitchen garden overflowed with culinary herbs and old varieties of vegetables. The magical garden held the traditional witches' herbs: mugwort, wormwood, rue, and belladonna, carefully tended and respected. Raphael built archways for climbing plants, his strong hands shaping metal into elegant curves. I created moon gardens in shadowy corners, filling them with white flowers that glowed in twilight. Together we placed benches in secret nooks and created hidden paths that wound like dreams through the growing green. Spring painted our world with possibilities. We spent endless weekends working side by side, sharing thermos cups of tea and stolen kisses between tasks. Raphael taught me Italian plant names while we worked. I showed him my grandmother's secret ways of talking to plants. Our magics merged and grew stronger together. We created hidden nooks with curved benches, where we'd sit wrapped in blankets during midnight storms. Wind chimes sang silver songs while butterflies danced through dill flowers. Raphael carved protection runes into the garden gates, while I blessed each new planting with ancient whispered rhymes learned from my grandmother. The garden seemed to respond to our combined energy. Plants grew stronger, bloomed longer, and produced more abundantly than either of us had seen before. Visitors began to comment on the special feeling of the space, a sense of peace, of magic, of possibilities. Summer arrived with abundance. Together we harvested herbs by moonlight, his strength complementing my knowledge of drying times and storage. Our little cottage filled with bundles of herbs hanging from rafters, their fragrance wrapping around us like magic. We made medicines and teas, tinctures and treats, sharing our bounty with neighbors who soon spoke of the miraculous healing properties of our herbs. I gave up my apartment and moved into the cottage, bringing my own herbs and books to join his. We converted the spare bedroom into an herb processing room, with drying racks and storage shelves. The kitchen windowsill overflowed with potted herbs, and dried bouquets hung from every beam. Neighborhood children began to visit, drawn by the magic of the space. We taught them about butterflies and bees, and the importance of growing things. Local herbalists and gardeners sought us out, and soon we were hosting monthly gatherings where people could learn and share knowledge. Autumn painted our garden in gold and amber, colors that matched Raphael's eyes. As leaves fell, we planted bulbs for spring, each one a promise for our future. We added cold frames and greenhouses, extending our growing season like we extended our love. defying natural limits through dedication and care. The cottage transformed alongside the garden. Raphael's grandfather's old furniture found new life with fresh cushions I sewed, stuffing the fabric with lavender and herbs for sweet dreams. We painted walls in earthy colors and hung dried flower wreaths in every room. The kitchen became a workshop where we experimented with new herbal blends and recipes. Even in winter, our garden lived. Evergreen herbs stood strong against snow. Witch hazel bloomed like yellow stars. We spent long evenings by the fire, planning next year's plantings while sharing spiced tea made from our own herbs. The wolf and the fairy, creating magic from soil and love. 1 year after our first meeting, on Halloween night, Raphael led me to the garden's heart. He'd created an arch of roses and moonflowers, their blooms glowing like pearls in the silver light. This time, we wore no masks, just our true selves, surrounded by the magic we'd grown together. "You've transformed more than this garden," he said, dropping to one knee in the soil we'd enriched together. The ring he offered gleamed in the moonlight, silver, set with tiny pressed herbs in clear resin. "You've transformed my whole world. Marry me, my fairy queen. Rule this magical realm by my side." Tears sparkled on my cheeks like morning dew. "We did it together," I whispered. The garden needed both of us, sunlight and shadow, morning and night, fairy and wolf. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Our wedding was held in the garden we'd created, fairy lights twinkling in trees we'd planted together. Herbs and flowers we'd grown ourselves decorated every surface. I wore a gown embroidered with herbs and flowers, and Raphael wore a suit with a boutonniere of herbs for love and fidelity. The air smelled of lavender and roses, of dreams made real through patience and love. We wrote our own vows, promising to tend to our love as carefully as we tended our garden, to nurture growth, to weather storms together, to always make space for magic. Our rings were carved with tiny leaves and flowers, blessed under the full moon in our herb garden. Now, years later, our garden has become known throughout the region as a place of healing and hope. People travel from miles around to walk our herb-lined paths, to sit in our meditation spaces, and purchase our healing blends. Some say they can feel the magic in the air, the love between fairy and wolf that infuses every plant, every stone. We've added new sections each year, a butterfly garden, a bee-friendly meadow, and a small orchard of heritage fruit trees. Each addition reflects another facet of our growing love, another layer of magic we've discovered together. The garden has become a living book of our love story, written in flowers and herbs and twining vines. Each Halloween, we host a masquerade in our garden. Raphael wears his wolf mask, I don my wings, and we dance beneath the stars like we did that first night. But now we're surrounded by the magic we've grown together, a living testament to how love, like a garden, can transform the wildest space into something beautiful. Young lovers often ask us our secret. We just smile and share what we've learned. Love, like a garden, needs both light and shadow. It needs space to grow wild and boundaries to grow strong. It needs daily tending and magic in equal measure. But most importantly, it needs two hearts willing to grow together through all seasons. Every morning, I still wake to find dew on the herbs like scattered diamonds. Every evening, I still watch moonflowers open their faces to the stars. And every moment between, I fall more in love with the wolf who helped a fairy create this magical space. This garden, where two worlds merge into something more powerful than either could be alone. Our cottage has grown too, with a sunroom full of tender plants and a workshop where we teach others the old ways. We've published books on herbal lore and magical gardening, sharing our knowledge while keeping the deepest magic for ourselves. Our unique blends of tea and healing herbs are sought after across the country. Some say you can't build a life on fairy tales, but Raphael and I know better. We've grown our own fairy tale from the ground up, nurtured it with love and intention, and watched it bloom into something more magical than dreams. Our garden stands as living proof that when the right souls meet, magic isn't something that just happens in stories. It grows wild and free, like herbs breaking through stone, like love blooming in unexpected places, like a fairy and a wolf creating their own enchanted world. Each season brings new growth, new challenges, and new magic to discover together. Our love, like our garden, continues to evolve and flourish, sending roots deep into the earth while reaching ever skyward. Sleep now, dream of magical gardens and masked balls, of love that transforms and grows. For in every seed we plant, in every flower that blooms, there lives the possibility of magic. Let the whispers of herbs and the song of night-blooming flowers guide your dreams to peaceful places. Beneath the moon's gentle glow, our garden whispers ancient secrets. True love, like the most potent herbs, grows stronger with each passing season. And if you listen closely to the wind in the roses, you might hear our story carried on the breeze, the fairy and the wolf who grew a paradise from love. Rest here a while in our garden of dreams, where magic blooms eternal and love grows wild and free. Let the peace we've cultivated seep into your soul, and may you find your own magical garden of the heart. For in the end, love is the greatest magic of all, and every garden holds the potential for transformation. Sweet dreams, dear ones, and remember, sometimes the most enchanted stories begin with a simple costume party and a heart open to magic. Skin deep, I used to believe beauty was a shield that could protect me from life's cruelties. Standing before my vanity in my darkened bedroom, I traced the silvery scars that now decorated my face like scattered constellations. My fingers lingered over my right eye, permanently clouded, a constant reminder of the night that changed everything. I, Cardigan Matthews, once crowned the most beautiful woman in 3 states, could barely look at my own reflection. The doctors had done their best after the accident. "A miracle you survived," they'd said, as if that should comfort me when half my face lay in ruins. The same people who had once fawned over me now spoke in whispers, their pity more unbearable than their judgment. My modeling agency dropped me. My so-called friends stopped calling. Even my fiancé couldn't hide his relief when I broke off our engagement. The autumn wind whispered through the ancient trees of Moonhaven Village as I pulled my hood closer, shielding my face from curious glances. 6 months had passed since I'd fled here, leaving behind the glittering world of beauty pageants and social media fame. In this remote corner of the world, where mist clung to the mountains and legends still danced in the shadows, nobody knew my name or my story. I preferred it that way. The bell above the door chimed softly as I entered the local apothecary, seeking my monthly supply of healing salves. The shop always captured my imagination. Dried herbs hanging from rough-hewn beams, bottles of every shape and size catching the light like captured stars, and the perpetual scent of sage and sweetgrass dancing in the air. Ancient books lined the walls, their spines bearing titles in languages I couldn't read, and crystals hummed with a subtle energy I'd grown to recognize during my visits. Ah, the mysterious lady returns. The voice, warm and rich like honey over thunder, belonged to Arlo, the enigmatic shopkeeper. I'd never seen anyone quite like him, tall and lean, with silver-streaked black hair that seemed to move of its own accord, and eyes that shifted color like opals in sunlight. His clothes, though simple, held an otherworldly elegance that spoke of places beyond the ordinary world. "Just the usual," I mumbled, keeping my face turned away. But Arlo, as always, moved into my line of sight with the grace of a cat. Today his eyes swirled with flecks of amber and gold, reflecting the warm light of dozens of enchanted lanterns that floated near the ceiling. "The usual isn't working, is it?" he asked softly. "Those scars carry more than physical pain. They bear the weight of a life interrupted, of dreams shattered like the mirrors you've hidden away. Something in his voice made me look up, really look at him for the first time. His eyes had settled on a deep violet, and within them, I saw not pity, but understanding. My carefully constructed walls began to crack. "Nothing works," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I've tried everything. Creams, serums, experimental treatments, even meditation and crystal healing. Nothing can erase what happened that night." "Perhaps," Arlo said, moving to a wall of bottles that seemed to arrange themselves at his approach. "You're trying to erase the wrong thing." He selected a crystal vial filled with what looked like liquid moonlight, its contents swirling with colors I had no names for. "This isn't for your scars, Cardigan Matthews." I froze at the sound of my name. "How did you—" "I know many things," he interrupted gently, "including the fact that what you seek isn't found in salves or potions. Your true healing lies in a journey, one I can help you take if you're brave enough." I should have been skeptical. I should have run. Instead, I found myself asking, "What kind of journey?" Arlo smiled, and the room seemed to brighten. The floating lanterns pulsed with increased warmth, and the crystals sang more clearly. A magical one, of course. Through realms where appearance means nothing, where truth shines brighter than any mirror, and where you might just find what you've lost, though it may not be what you think. "You're talking about actual magic? Like spells and enchantments?" "I'm talking about truth, Cardigan. The deepest kind of magic there is." He extended his hand, the vial balanced delicately between his fingers. "Are you interested?" I stared at the swirling liquid, remembering the countless treatments and procedures I'd already tried. "What's the catch?" "Only that you must trust me completely, and be willing to see yourself as you truly are. Not as others see you, or even as you see yourself now. The journey will be different for you than for anyone else who has taken it. Magic shapes itself to the soul that seeks it. Perhaps it was desperation, or maybe the hypnotic way the potion caught the light, but I found myself reaching for the vial. As my fingers brushed against his, a spark of electricity shot through my arm, and the liquid within the crystal container gleamed with my reflected face, whole and unscarred, yet somehow different from my former beauty. "When do we start?" I asked, my heart racing with possibility. "We already have." Arlo's smile turned mysterious as he gestured toward the back of the shop. The beaded curtain parted of its own accord, revealing a doorway that hadn't been there before. Beyond it lay not the expected storage room, but a path winding through a forest bathed in ethereal blue light. Ancient trees stretched toward a sky filled with unfamiliar stars, their branches intertwining to form natural archways overhead. My heart jumped into my throat. "Right now?" "Magic waits for no one, my dear." He offered his arm, and I noticed intricate patterns shifting beneath the surface of his skin, like living tattoos made of starlight. "Shall we?" Taking a deep breath, I slipped my hand into the crook of his elbow. As we stepped through the doorway, the familiar scents of the apothecary faded, replaced by the crisp sweetness of night-blooming jasmine and something else, something wild and ancient that made my skin tingle. The forest around us pulsed with life. Tiny lights, like earthbound stars, floated between the trees. The ground beneath our feet was carpeted with moss that glowed with each step, creating patterns that spread outward like ripples in a pond. Flowers I had never seen before bloomed in our wake, their petals transparent as glass, but stronger than steel. "Welcome to the Twilight Realm," Arlo said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Here, things are not always what they seem, and seeming is not always what is true. This is one of the many spaces between spaces, where magic flows more freely than water, and transformation is as natural as breathing." As if to demonstrate his point, A nearby bush suddenly transformed into a cluster of butterflies, their wings shimmering with impossible colors before they dissolved into mist. The mist reformed into delicate crystal chimes that played melodies I felt in my bones rather than heard with my ears. "Why are you helping me?" I asked, clutching his arm tighter as we followed the winding path deeper into the magical forest. "What could you possibly gain from this?" "Because everyone deserves to see their own light," he replied, helping me over a stream that flowed upward instead of down, its waters carrying memories that flickered like fish beneath the surface. "Even those who think it's been extinguished. Besides, you're not the first to seek transformation here, nor will you be the last. There have been others, many, though each journey is unique to the seeker." His expression darkened momentarily. "Some find what they're looking for. Others, well, let's say that not everyone is ready for the truth magic reveals." We walked in comfortable silence until we reached a clearing. In its center stood an ancient tree, its trunk twisted into the shape of a doorway. Through it, I could see what looked like my own reflection, but something was different, deeper, more real than any mirror I'd ever looked into. "The mirror of truth," Arlo explained. "It shows not what you are, but what you believe yourself to be. Every person who steps before it sees something different, something that speaks to their deepest beliefs about themselves." I approached cautiously. The reflection that greeted me was grotesque. My scars appeared deeper, darker, like canyons carved into my flesh. My blind eye was a pit of darkness that seemed to swallow light, and shadows writhed across my skin like living things. "This is how you see yourself," Arlo said quietly, standing behind me. "But it's not what I see." "What do you see?" I whispered, unable to look away from the horrible image. Instead of answering, he stepped closer, his chest barely touching my back. His hands came to rest lightly on my shoulders, and suddenly the reflection began to change. The scars softened, becoming silver threads that caught the light like strands of precious metal. My blind eye transformed into a pool of swirling colors, like a galaxy contained within an iris. The shadows retreated, replaced by a gentle luminescence that seemed to emanate from within. "I see strength," he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. "I see someone who has endured pain, but hasn't let it break her. I see beauty that runs far deeper than skin, beauty that transforms rather than fades." Tears slid down my cheeks as the reflection continued to shift, showing me moments from my past. Not the pageant wins or modeling shots, but times I'd shown kindness to others, moments of genuine laughter, instances of courage I'd forgotten. I saw myself comforting a fellow contestant who'd lost a competition, teaching young girls about self-confidence, volunteering at shelters even when cameras weren't around. "The first step to healing," Arlo said, turning me gently to face him, "is understanding that your worth was never in your face. It was always in your heart, your spirit, your capacity for kindness and growth." Looking into his eyes, which had turned a soft gold in the magical light, I felt something shift inside me, like a key opening a lock I hadn't known existed. The world around us seemed to pulse in response, the magical energies of the realm dancing more vibrantly. Our magical journey continued through landscapes that defied description. We crossed a bridge made of woven moonbeams, where each step created ripples of light that spread out into the starlit void below. We visited a garden where flowers sang lullabies in ancient languages, their petals changing color with each note. In a crystal cave that amplified thoughts into visible shapes, Arlo taught me to craft simple spells. "Magic," he explained, guiding my hands through the motions, "is simply the art of seeing possibility where others see limitation. It's about understanding that everything, every person, every object, every moment, contains multiple truths, multiple potentials. As days blended into weeks, I found myself looking forward to our lessons, not just for the magic, but for Arlo's presence. He had a way of making me forget my scars, of helping me see beauty in unexpected places. When he looked at me, I felt whole again, not because he ignored my injuries, but because he helped me see how they had transformed rather than destroyed me. But it wasn't all enchantment and wonder. One evening, as we rested beside a pool of singing water, its surface reflecting impossible constellations, a shadow fell over our sanctuary. The temperature dropped, and the magical lights flickering around us dimmed to barely visible embers. "What do we have here?" a voice like crackling frost said. "Teaching another student, dear brother?" Arlo stiffened beside me. "Marlowe." A figure emerged from the shadows, a woman with Arlo's high cheekbones and shifting eyes, but where his features held warmth, hers were sharp with cruel intention. Her hair moved like living shadows, and her gown seemed made of crystallized darkness. "Don't you remember what happened to your last student?" Marlowe's gaze fixed on me, and I felt my scars begin to burn. "How many more must you break before you learn?" "That was your doing, not mine," Arlo said, his voice hard as he stepped between us. Power radiated from him now, making the air thick with potential. "I merely showed her the truth, that magic always comes with a price." Marlowe smiled, and it was beautiful and terrible. "Shall I show this one too? Shall I reveal what really happens to those who seek transformation without being worthy of it?" Before either of us could react, she flung out her hand. Dark energy crackled through the air toward me, promising to strip away not just the progress I'd made, but everything I was. Without thinking, I raised my own hands, remembering Arlo's lessons about possibility and limitation, about multiple truths existing simultaneously. The darkness hit what felt like an invisible wall before me, fragmenting into thousands of tiny butterflies that dissolved into starlight. Both Marlowe and Arlo stared at me in shock. "Impossible," Marlowe whispered. "You're just a human." But I understood then what Arlo had been trying to teach me all along. "No," I said, standing taller. "I'm someone who finally sees herself clearly. Someone who understands that scars can be strength, that broken things can be beautiful, that transformation doesn't mean erasing what was, but building something new from it." Power flowed through me, not dark like Marlowe's, but bright and warm like sunlight on water. The scars on my face tingled, and I watched in amazement as they transformed into streams of light that danced around me like cosmic ribbons. My blind eye, rather than being a weakness, had become a window to seeing magic itself. "You see, sister," Arlo said softly. "True magic isn't about power or price. It's about transformation. Not of the body, but of the heart. Not about becoming something different, but about revealing what was always there." Marlowe's form began to waver. "This isn't over," she hissed before dissolving into shadow. "Some truths are too harsh for love to overcome." In the silence that followed, Arlo turned to me with wonder in his color-changing eyes. "In all my years of teaching, I've never seen anyone channel pure light like that. You didn't just resist her darkness, you transformed it." "I had a good teacher," I said, stepping closer to him. "One who taught me that what we think of as flaws can become our greatest strength." Arlo reached out, tracing the now luminous lines on my face with gentle fingers. "Your scars," he murmured. "They've become channels for your magic. The very things you thought broke you have made you more powerful than you could imagine." "Is that possible?" "With you, I'm beginning to believe anything is." His hand cupped my cheek, and I leaned into his touch. "You've transformed more than just yourself, Cardigan. You've reminded me why I fell in love with magic in the first place, because it shows us the truth about ourselves, if we're brave enough to see it. Looking into his eyes, which had turned the deep blue of twilight, I saw my reflection again, not as I had been, or even as I was now, but as something entirely new. A woman who had walked through fire and emerged not undamaged, but stronger. Someone who had learned that real magic isn't about changing how you look, but about changing how you see. "And what about love itself?" I asked softly, feeling the magic pulse between us like a shared heartbeat. His answer was a kiss that tasted of starlight and possibility, of magic and truth, of endings and beginnings all wrapped into one moment of perfect understanding. The realm around us responded, erupting in a display of light and color that reflected the joy in our hearts. When we finally parted, the magical realm around us had transformed. The trees sparkled with thousands of tiny lights, and the air was filled with floating flowers that emitted soft, musical chimes as they drifted past. Even Marlowe's lingering shadows had been transformed into gentle twilight, proving that even darkness had its place in the balance of things. "The realm responds to joy," Arlo explained, smiling. "And truth. What truth is that?" "That sometimes the most powerful magic of all is simply allowing yourself to be loved exactly as you are. That beauty isn't about perfection. It's about authenticity. About embracing all of yourself, even the parts you once thought were broken." Hand in hand, we walked back toward the door to his shop, but I knew I wouldn't be using it to run away anymore. I had found something far more valuable than the perfect face I'd lost. I had found myself, and in doing so, found love that saw beneath the surface to the magic that had been there all along. The scars remained, but now they shimmered with an inner light that matched the magic I'd discovered within myself. My blind eye, once a source of shame, had become a window to seeing things others missed, the subtle magics that danced at the edges of the ordinary world. Each morning, when I looked in the mirror, I saw not the beauty queen I'd once been, but something far more precious. A woman who had learned to see her own worth. Arlo transformed his shop into a sanctuary for others like me, people seeking not just physical healing, but spiritual transformation. Together we helped them discover their own inner magic, teaching them that true beauty flows from accepting all parts of oneself, even the broken ones. Marlowe's shadows never fully disappeared, but they served as a reminder that even darkness has its purpose in teaching us to appreciate the light. As I stood in our magical realm, watching new seekers discover their own power, I realized that some accidents aren't accidents at all, but doorways to destiny. My scars had led me here, to this love, to this purpose, to this understanding that true beauty isn't about being flawless. It's about being fearlessly, authentically yourself. "Ready for your next lesson?" Arlo asked, his eyes twinkling with mischief and love as he pulled me close. The magical lights around us danced in response to our joy, creating patterns of light and shadow that told their own stories of transformation. I smiled, feeling the magic pulse beneath my skin like a second heartbeat, my scars glowing with inner starlight. With you. Always. And so our story continued, not as a tale of lost beauty regained, but as something far more magical, a journey of discovering that sometimes the most beautiful things in life are born from our deepest wounds, and that true love sees not with the eyes, but with the heart. Magical threads. My fingers danced across the ancient wood of my grandmother's loom, feeling the familiar warmth pulse beneath my touch. Each thread I wove carried whispers of emotion, memories of joy and sorrow braided together in an intricate dance. The villagers called it magic, but to me, it was simply the language my heart spoke through silk and wool. Generation after generation of women in my family had sat at this very loom, weaving not just fabric, but hopes and dreams into every piece they created. The morning light filtered through my shop's dusty windows, casting golden rays across the countless fabrics that adorned my walls. Each piece told a story, a shawl that brought comfort to a grieving widow, its threads woven with gentle understanding and peace. A blanket that wrapped newborns in their first moments of life, imbued with dreams of bright futures. A scarf that gave courage to a child facing their fears, strengthened with threads of bravery and confidence. I paused my weaving to adjust a loose thread, admiring how the sunlight caught the iridescent fibers. The bell above my shop door chimed, and I looked up to find a tall figure casting a long shadow across my workspace. His fine clothes and jeweled rings marked him as someone of importance, but it was his eyes that caught my attention. Deep violet and unnaturally bright, like twilight trapped in crystal. "Mistress Lark," he said, his voice as smooth as polished marble. "I am Drivik, a collector of rare and beautiful things. Your reputation precedes you." His gaze swept across my workshop, lingering on each piece with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Something in his tone made my fingers tighten around my shuttle, but I pushed the unease aside. After all, wealthy patrons often sought out my work. "Welcome to my shop. How may I help you?" He moved closer, examining the tapestry taking shape on my loom, a wedding gift I was creating for a local couple, threaded with love and loyalty. His presence felt like a storm cloud blocking the sun, and I noticed the roses I kept in a vase by the window wilting slightly as he passed. Such extraordinary work. The way you capture emotion in the thread. It's unlike anything I've seen. His fingers hovered over the fabric, not quite touching. "I would very much like to commission a piece." I should have listened to my instincts that day. Should have noticed how his shadow seemed to move independently of his body, how the plants near my window drooped in his presence, how my loom's usual warm hum turned discordant when he drew near. But his words were honey-sweet, and his gold was real enough. When he asked to see my technique up close, I didn't hesitate to demonstrate. That was my mistake. The last thing I remembered was his violet eyes blazing with triumph before darkness claimed me. I awoke in a cold stone room, my beloved loom mockingly familiar beside a barred window. Beyond the glass, mountains I didn't recognize clawed at a steel-gray sky. My heart ached for my small village, for the comfort of my shop, for the simple life I'd taken for granted. Days blurred together, as Drivik forced me to weave dark magic into the fabric. My tears fell silently onto threads that once brought joy, now twisted into instruments of fear and control. Each tapestry I created under his command felt like a betrayal of everything my gift stood for. He sold these corrupted pieces to lords and kings, spreading discord and darkness across the land. But even in my darkest moments, I kept one small act of defiance. Into every piece, I wove a thread of hope, a silent cry for help that I prayed someone would hear. These threads of light were so subtle that Drivik never noticed them, too focused on the dark magic he demanded. Each night, as I fell into exhausted sleep, I whispered a prayer that someone would understand my message and would feel the hope buried beneath the darkness. Miles away, in a village nestled between rolling hills, my prayer found its answer most unexpectedly. Finn Alden wiped the sweat from his brow, the heat of his forge painting his skin in warm oranges and reds. His calloused hands, strong enough to bend metal to his will, gently lifted a scarf from his workbench. My scarf, though he didn't know it yet. He'd found it in a traveling merchant's cart, drawn to it for reasons he couldn't explain. The merchant had acquired it from someone who'd purchased one of my forced creations, but had sensed the darkness within it. Yet beneath that darkness, Finn felt something else, a whisper of hope, a cry for help. That night, as he slept with the scarf nearby, my magic reached out to him through dreams. He saw my face, tear-stained but determined, my hands moving across the loom in desperate patterns. He felt my fear, my hope, my silent plea for salvation. The connection between us, forged through that single thread of defiant hope, grew stronger with each passing night. The dreams continued, each one revealing more. Fragments of my journey, glimpses of Dreivik's fortress, the mountain peaks that imprisoned me. Finn's heart, pure and true, responded to my magic in ways I never imagined possible. His soul recognized mine across the distance, two hearts calling out to one another through the darkness. He began his journey at first light, guided only by the pull of my enchanted weaving and his unwavering determination. The village thought him mad, chasing dreams of a woman he'd never met, but Finn knew the truth in his heart. Each night as he traveled, the dreams grew stronger, our connection deeper. For weeks he traveled, following the thread of magic that connected us. He scaled treacherous peaks, crossed raging rivers, and navigated dense forests. The scarf led him true, its magic growing stronger as he drew closer to Dreivik's domain. Along the way, he gathered stories of dark magic spreading through the kingdoms, of nobles transformed by mysterious tapestries, and his resolve only grew stronger. When our eyes finally met through the bars of my prison, something shifted in the very fabric of reality. Finn's gaze held mine, green as summer leaves and deep as ancient forests, filled with a recognition that transcended our physical meeting. "I've been dreaming of you," he whispered, his rough-hewn hands reaching through the bars to touch mine. The moment our fingers met, warmth flooded through me, chasing away the cold that had settled in my bones during my captivity. "And I've been weaving dreams of you," I replied, my heart thundering in my chest. His touch felt like coming home, like finding a piece of myself I hadn't known was missing. At that moment, I understood why my grandmother had always said that the strongest magic comes from love. Together, we formulated a plan. Finn's knowledge of metalwork proved invaluable. He understood the nature of binding and breaking in ways that complemented my own gifts perfectly. He taught me about the weak points in metal, and I showed him how similar principles applied to magical bindings. While Dreivik slept, we worked to unravel the dark enchantments he had forced me to create, weakening his power thread by thread. Each night, as we worked together, our connection grew stronger. Finn would tell me stories of his village, of the people he'd helped with his craft, and I found myself falling deeper in love with his gentle heart and unwavering courage. His hands, strong enough to shape metal, would tenderly brush away my tears when memories of the dark magic overwhelmed me. But Dreivik was no fool. He sensed the changing tide of magic in his fortress, and felt his power weakening as we undid my corrupted creations. On the night we planned to escape, he confronted us in my prison chamber, his violet eyes blazing with fury. "You dare to undo my work," he snarled, dark energy crackling around him like lightning. The shadows in the room writhed and twisted, responding to his rage. What followed was chaos incarnate. Finn moved with the grace of a practiced warrior, his blacksmith strength meeting Dreivik's magic head-on. I worked frantically at my loom, weaving counterspells into existence, attempting to protect us both from Dreivik's increasingly desperate attacks. Each thread I wove shimmered with the power of our combined love and determination. Then came the moment that nearly shattered my world. Dreivik, realizing he was losing control, summoned a blade of pure darkness. It arced through the air toward me, a deadly shadow aimed at my heart. But Finn, brave, beautiful Finn, threw himself in its path. The blade struck true, and he crumpled to the floor, his blood staining the stones beneath my loom. Time seemed to stop. In that frozen moment, I saw everything with perfect clarity. My hands moved of their own accord, selecting threads of pure gold and silver, weaving with a speed and precision I'd never known before. Into that final tapestry, I poured everything. My love for Finn, my defiance of Dreivik, my grandmother's teachings, and the pure, untainted magic that had been passed down through generations of my family. The magic built like a wave, each pass of the shuttle adding to its power. Love, pure and true, flowed through my fingers into the threads. I wove our shared dreams, our hopes for the future, the strength of our connection. As I wove the final thread, the tapestry blazed with light so bright it turned night to day. Dreivik screamed as the magic consumed him, his form dissolving into nothing more than scattered threads that vanished into the air. The light enveloped Finn's still form, lifting him gently from the floor. I watched in wonder as his wound closed, color returning to his face. When his eyes fluttered open, they found mine immediately, filled with love and understanding. "I knew I'd find you," he whispered, reaching up to cup my cheek. "From the first dream, I knew my heart belonged to you." My loom gave one final pulse of warmth before falling silent, its ancient magic spent. But as Finn's arms encircled me, I realized that some forms of magic don't require enchanted looms or mystical threads. They exist in the spaces between heartbeats, in the quiet moments of trust, in the courage to fight for what's right. We returned to my village together, where my shop still stood waiting. The loom now sits in its familiar corner, creating beautiful but ordinary fabrics. Yet every piece I weave still tells a story, our story, of love that transcends magic, of courage born from compassion, and of two hearts bound together by threads stronger than any enchantment. Finn's forge stands next door to my shop now, and the sound of his hammer rings in harmony with the rhythm of my shuttle. Our crafts complement each other perfectly, his strength and precision matching my creativity and intuition. The villagers say we've brought new life to the community, our love spreading warmth and joy just as surely as my magical creations once did. Each evening, as the sun sets and the day's work ends, we sit together in the garden we've planted. Sometimes he holds me close and tells me about the dreams that led him to me, his voice full of wonder even after all this time. Sometimes I weave simple patterns while he works nearby, our comfortable silence worth more than any magical creation. And sometimes, when the light hits just right, I catch glimpses of magic in the ordinary moments, in the way his smile still makes my heart skip, in how perfectly our hands fit together, in the dreams we continue to weave into reality. The legends of my magical loom have faded into stories now, whispered around firesides on winter nights. But I've discovered that the greatest magic of all lies in the simple act of loving and being loved in return. It's in the way Finn's hand finds mine in the dark, in the sound of his laughter mixing with mine. In the future we're creating together, a tapestry more beautiful than any I could have imagined. As I close my eyes each night, safe in Finn's embrace, I thank whatever fate or fortune brought us together. Our love story may not have begun like a fairy tale, but it has given me something far more precious than magic. It has given me home. In the end, I've learned that true love is the strongest magic of all, weaving hearts together in patterns that last forever.